Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Well, this is going to be a Cracker Jack interview. I have to tell you, 2 Cracker Jacks. Marjory DIANE Lyons, Dr. Lyons, and it was an author of a wonderful book that we featured as a book of the month called Think You Can't Write? Think Again, a foolproof guide to getting your story written at last. And her son, Tim Jefferson, who's vice president of TellingYourStory.com. And they're both here in our studio. Yes. And, of course, they will be at the Boomer Expo at the book review table. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Anita.
Well, you never stop. Both of you, you're working so hard. And, you know, Marjorie, I admire you so much. Now you have come out with another book we can tell us about later. But the thing that I admired about both of them is they believe, as I do, that if you have a story inside you and you don't tell it, it's all lost forever. It's kind of like, just like I feel about funerals. I just share this, I think you need to celebrate someone's death, not mourn it and put them in the ground. So that's and the way to celebrate someone's life is through pictures and through what you can say about them. What do you think about that, Marjorie?
That's absolutely true, because only you know the story about your own life, and you know the way you want it told. That's the important thing while you're still here, to tell the stories that you have in your heart and soul. No one else knows that. And you really do want people to know who you are, and you want to be sort of appreciated by the time you've lived a number of years. So many of my book clients have wonderful anecdotes that they tell me and that we put into their books. So it's a wonderful thing to do.
Before we talk to Tim, I want to talk more about you. Tell me how you started in your life and how you got into writing and creating books. I mean, there's got to be some passion. It's a very labor-intensive profession.
It is labor-intensive. I think it's in my DNA, to tell you the truth, Anita. I had numbers of people in my family who were would-be writers. So I observed that as a young child growing up. I saw my great-aunt write at the giant Oliver typewriter back in the 30s, and she was writing stories of different kinds, and I was aware of that. She actually wrote letters from Santa Claus to us. We knew that she was writing them, my sister and I. Then I began to write some things myself when I was about 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and I wrote stories and plays that I wrote and produced in grade school when I was in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So I loved writing. It was just a very natural thing for me, as it still is, even today. As I was driving down, I was composing something that I'm going to write for my writing group that meets on Saturday. So I have something in my head right now.
You know what I love, though, about this is you are over 50, and
yes.
Probably over 60.
Yes, I'm more than that.
Okay, so the point is this, that when people say, oh, I'm getting older and what's going to happen with my life, you are a role model, and that's what I've loved when I met you.
Thank you.
And what you're doing. But you're creating something, and I'm so big into this, a forever life. People don't die. Maybe they die with their skin off, but they don't die if you get a hold of them. So come on, Tim, tell us why you, as a young man, could do everything else, and now you're doing this with your mother. Do you love this?
I do, because it really is a valuable gift for our client, but also for their family.
Yeah.
And
how so? Tell us about that.
well, as Mom said, people have the story in them, but it's the little stories that maybe they don't know, their grandchildren don't know, or their great-grandchildren don't know. So it's that little insight into Grandma, Grandpa, how they got started, where they grew up, did they walk to school? I mean, all that typical stuff is one thing, but it's beyond that. How they like working on the farm. Did they ever go to the big city and watch movies and things? So it's the little secrets of one's life that you're
able to do. But it takes, I think, a skilled person like Marjorie, like your mom, to get that out of them, doesn't it?
I've learned a lot from her.
Wow.
Okay, Marjorie. So
That's good to
let's. Are people shy, or how do you get them really to talk about all these little things?
You know, you need to meet with them, or I like to meet with them and talk a little bit about just what Tim is saying. Where did you grow up? Everybody likes to talk about that, because there's been a long journey from wherever that was to wherever we are today. And you begin by talking about things that are comfortable, things you remember, games they played in school, their playmates, and what it was like in high school, and moving on from that point. So it is the personal touch where you really are interested in hearing what they have to say. We really are genuinely interested in what people have to say about their lives. And then what has happened since then. You lead them gently through the decades, as I've mentioned before. That's the chart to use, your own decades, from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and so forth. What were the things that happened in that time, in those different times? Not everything was tremendously important. For example, from 1 to 10, you learn to talk. You learn to walk. Other things. Some people learned to ride a bicycle, but maybe not until they were in the next decade. And so there are things that happened during those formative years. I don't necessarily call them formative, that sounds a little scientific, but it is the time during which their lives and hearts and souls and behaviors are formed. And as we talk, I learn about them.
So Marjorie, and I want you to hold your book up. I think it's important. Hold it up because we have this on. Let's just get it's too bright. Turn it a little bit to the left, more towards Tim. That's good.
Okay.
No, well, what's happened is the light's catching it, so I'll have to. Right there. No, a little bit more. Over. Just like that. Don't move it. Just for a minute. I want people to see the book.
I do too.
Yeah, just hold the book like that. For
I love the cover. I love the cover.
The cover's beautiful.
I love the book.
I love the book. I'm going to ask you probably a question, a little embarrassing question. Do you have one that you did for yourself? I almost knew the answer because it's like
squirm.
No, it's and maybe you did, but the problem is the cooks never usually. That's what happens.
That's right.
The poor. That we just say that the shoe repair man wears these old shoes.
That's right. Well, I have bits and pieces.
Okay, Tim, that's you gotta make something because she has one interesting life, right?
Yeah.
But see, she's too busy to stop to do that, so it's okay, Marjorie. See, you have something going that is so great, and before, and Tim, I'm gonna let you hold this up, and then I want you to talk about this.
Okay.
My son wrote my book for me.
Okay. But let's get that. Yeah, I love that. Now we have someone watching and listening. Go ahead. Talk about that. They just presented me this morning with their newest and latest and greatest idea. I just think this is such a winner. Tell them about it, Tim.
For the last 17 years, Mom has been helping people write their memoirs, which oftentimes takes a year, and it can be hundreds of pages, and it's a lot of effort for both the client and for us. But this is a new idea that is telling your story with words and pictures. And so what we've done is organize a book with photos by decade, different categories, early years, school years, family years, so forth, so that people can take those dusty old albums under their bed and take the best...
Have you been looking in my closet?
Sounds that way, doesn't it?
Take the best photos that talk about each decade.
Yeah.
We help them do that, and then we help them with the captions or the little short story that might be associated with it. And we come up with a book like this that can be 20, 30, up to 90 pages. And they can have it on the coffee table and share it with their friends. If they're getting a little older, they could share it with their caregiver. And that way, they're not just a patient. They get to know the person inside that old body.
I'm going to stop you there because I have to relate something to you. I used to go and volunteer at nursing homes, and I would see, and as a gerontologist, I appreciated the older adults. And of course, you might have someone lying in bed who maybe was president of a huge company, and there he is in his little gown, and he can hardly speak. And you have people taking care of them who are so much less than they are, and yet they don't really know who that person is. No. So what I did is I went and I talked to a nursing home administrator, and I said, I would be willing to interview these people, put up a plaque for them so that everybody knew who they were taking care of.
That's right.
So what happens? They said, oh no, there's a privacy law, we can't do it.
Oh, too bad.
But that's what you've just now said about that person now who is a caregiver. They should know the importance of the person they're taking care of.
Well, if I could add to that, the use of the photographs helps the individual tell the story, because we all have stories that we can talk about when we see a picture of a birthday party or a scene on a beach or a ski slope or whatever it is. There are the stories. And Tim talks about the captions. We can put little teeny captions under, by teeny I mean 2 or 3 or 4 sentences by the picture. And there is the story of what happened during that span of life. And it's easy for the folks to do that.
And Marjorie and Tim, what you've really created, not only that person is going to be able to tell the story, their family members will love this, because don't you, the little grandchildren will say, well, tell me, Grandpa, about this, or tell me, Grandma, what you did. That's who you're really doing this for, aren't you?
Right. Well, it's also for people who, we're all about wellness programs, and we feel this is a memory tool. People who are in need of mental exercise.
I have to stop you. This Susan Shipman says, brilliant idea.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's good. We get people who talk to us on Facebook. Okay, go ahead.
So, as people, they need mental exercise.
Yes.
And so looking at a picture and telling their aide or telling their great-grandchild about that. I was 40 or more, and I asked Dad, why did you go to the University of Vermont? And he said, well, my buddy had a car, and he was going there. And so I went to that school because I knew I could come home and visit.
No, you see, it's not like that's the best school. No, right. It's because my friend went there, right?
Right. I mean, how silly, but...
But he did go and graduate.
He did.
Too.
And the other thing, he was a sales manager for a chemical company in the Midwest. I said, how'd you ever get that? He said, well, I went to school and I got a degree in etymology.
That's right.
I thought, bugs?
Bugs, spiders.
My dad.
And you found out about your dad that you didn't know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. Marjorie, before we run out of time, though, and you can put the book down if you want now, Tim, but I want everyone to know you can go to the Boomer Expo on coming up Tuesday. That's January the 22nd, and we have a book booth with our authors from the last 6 months, which, of course, Marjorie, Tim will be there, and you can talk to them. But the point I want to do now is because I know I jumped into that new enterprise, but I want you now to talk about the book.
Yes.
That's how I first met you.
That's right.
So why don't you do that?
I got the idea, my co-author and I got the idea that we would write chapters about what we know best, which is how to write your book. And that's what this first book is. We've just written the second one, as you know. We know that people get the idea about writing, but they don't get around to it. That's why we say getting your story written at last. That's a key key words at the end of the title, and we help you step by step through this workbook, if you want to call it that, or guidebook. One of my students in my writing class has earmarked and paperclipped all these pages because he found them so valuable to write his own story, step by step. As Tim has indicated, I figured out, that if you take decades one by one and find out, you can even lay this out on a piece of paper and, if you wish, decade by decade or a sheet per 10 years, and write down the important things that happened during that time period, then you begin to see that you have some kind of a structure that you can put together about your life. But as we've said, it isn't just dates. We have a lot about ancestry and looking into people's lives that give only dates of births and deaths. Well, where is the story? We need to find out what these stories are. As Tim suggested, he found out things about his dad by asking about, where did you go to school, how did you happen to get that job? Those are things that people tell. One of the ones that I like to tell, Anita, is that one of my book clients was turning 100 years old. She was just wonderful, marvelous, and she did live beyond 100.
And you know, I wrote a book, Live to be 100 Plus, in 1992, and people laughed at me. Who's going to live to be 100? I said, You are.
Yes.
So just be careful.
Well, she did, and I asked Florence as I was working with her and producing her book, which was a couple of 100 pages long, what are you most proud of in the 100 years? What are you most proud of in your lifetime, Florence? And she said, well, Marge, I'm most proud of teaching little children to read as a first grade teacher. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yes, it is.
I mean, she had lived through World War I, World War II, raised a family, had various difficulties, as we all do in life, and that's what she was most proud of.
But isn't that why teachers are not paid well, but they love what they do? Because how many times older adults will go and they will look at the teachers, or people who in their 60s will say, oh, I have a teacher, she's 90, and she was the most wonderful person, she influenced me.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
I'd love to hear you say that, because of course I have been an educator all my life. I started out teaching in elementary school, wound up at the college level helping people with their doctoral dissertations. So I had a long journey.
So you appreciate what this is.
And so for Florence to say such a thing, even though I have no idea what her pay was, but it wasn't much back in those days, you could be sure of that. So the anecdotes are the thing that make the life unique. One of the gentlemen whose book I did write, every single word of his book, with great pleasure and respect, lived in Arkansas as a little boy, and he loved to talk with me about what it was like to wake up in the morning and wash his face from the water outside the old kitchen, and then his mother would have him make butter, and he could stand on a little chair and chug the butter churn up and down and up and down and up and down until the milk turned into butter. And he talked about that. He made the sounds that he heard, and he was just enchanted being able to talk with me about his early years.
This is so beautiful. That's why I fell in love with what you do, and you're so fortunate to have your son as part of your company.
I know that.
Because you know, so many times you don't even get to see your son. They live too far away, and if you do, they're too busy. But Tim is he's such a star in his own right.
Yes,
and
he is.
To have this together, I just love, I'm so glad you were able to come to the studio today, and I hope people will come to the Boomer Expo Tuesday, January the 22nd, and say hello to you, and so we have some more people watching, but I want to keep going on with this. The one difficulty that I believe, and you have explained this before, is that people have too much to say. It's wonderful for them to say things, and it takes a talent like you, Marjorie, to decipher everything and siphon through it and say, edit. Okay, and I'm sure sometimes they're very disappointed. They say, no, that's really important, but you know what's going to make that book, right?
You do. Yeah. And many times people say things sort of as an aside comment. Oh, well, I had my purple hair ribbon on that day, and it turns out that her mother loved purple and the child hated purple. But that was an important thing for an 85-year-old woman to say. Yes. So of course that's part of the story, you know. I remember hair ribbons myself. Maybe you do too.
Listen, wait, I still have some ribbons that I use. But when you get gifts and they have the gorgeous ribbons, and I save the ribbons, and every once in a while if I go out or something, I tie a ribbon on my wrist or do something with it.
Fun.
Yeah, and you got to do something. Yeah. But you know that I want to talk about, I do have a grandson who teaches third graders in Detroit.
How lovely.
And they, and it's very cold in Detroit, as you can imagine.
Yes.
But he feels so positive, even though he has quite a diverse group of children there. It is so important to him. And I was thinking about that teaching, because to have a young man teaching third graders is very, very important.
That's right. Well, we find that my book clients love to talk to Tim, too, because so often they're talking to an old lady like me. That's not much fun.
Don't ever, no, not an old lady. You're a brave lady. You're
not
an old lady. You're a warrior. We call people
Maybe
like
she should
warriors.
just have the men clients, and I'll have the women clients.
No, that's what they want, all the time.
That works out pretty well.
That does. No, but together you're quite a team. So this is what we want to tell people. If you are listening and you're interested in having a book written, you probably can't do it yourself. We have more people here. Let's see. Wait, Susan says, hold on, let me see what she says. She says, mention the title of the book and Marjorie's name, please. I came in late. Okay,
Okay.
Let me do that. Let me get you here. Okay, let me do that again. Very important. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Yes, it's Marjory Diane Lyons, Lyons, Dr. Lyons. She's the author and president of the company, and her son Tim Jefferson, VP of TellingYourStory.com. Let me just tell you the name of the book. Then is Think You Can't Write, Think Again. So this is the name of the book. Think You Can't Write, Think Again. A foolproof guide to getting your story written at last. It's very important. And if something comes up and you can't get this written down quickly enough, you can always call our office at Boomer Times at 561-864-1101 and ask, and we will help you. But in the meantime, you can go to their website, which is TellingYourStory.com.
And they can also get the book on Amazon. This first book is listed on Amazon. When we talk about the second one, it's not off the presses yet, so that it'll be about a month before that's available.
Telling-your-story.com.
Yes.
You have to put the hyphen so you'll go somewhere else.
Thank you, she says. Okay. I love it.
Thank you for
Yes,
asking.
this is why
Love to hear
Facebook
from
Live
you.
is so wonderful.
Or
because
come on
you can have a
Tuesday and see us.
conversation.
Yeah.
That's
Right,
right.
Susan, I hope you're coming to the expo. You know,
Yes,
this
Tuesday.
is a wonderful thing to
Look
do.
forward to meeting you.
Yeah, well, thank you. We really appreciate your coming here this morning, and I can't wait to see you at the Boomer Expo, and I can't wait for you to write your mother's book, Tim. You know, not yet. She's
I don't
not
know
ready.
about that yet.
Okay, but the other book that you brought, the newest, latest thing you're doing,
Oh.
it's this gorgeous book, and I'm going to tell them the price because it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
For $2,000, you can get this photograph book with little tidbits on everything. That's the best gift you could ever give a parent. And you know, people say, what should I give my parent? It's Christmas or it's a holiday, it's their birthday. Get this book. This is what I suggest. So you can call them and work on it. So thank you very much.